Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Everything Practice Management. And today's webinar is accredited for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. Okay. I kindly request you to use the chat window at all times to ask any questions that you may have regarding this topic. Or if you want to wait till the end when I open the floors for any Q&A, you can maybe use the chat window then. But at all times, both myself and my support staff would be more than happy to introduce any questions that are valid during the flow or the agenda of topics that we're going to be discussing, and most certainly address them before the end of the webinar. I request you to mute your phone lines if you're especially using your computer. Sometimes there could be a bit of echo feedback. And if the volume or the audio is not that great, maybe sometimes due to internet issues, then we request that you dial in into the phone numbers provided, which were part of the invitation that you must have received for today's webinar. Okay. Like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has this very specific agenda. When we talk about practice management and what a legal practitioner has to do day in and day out to manage their business, manage their profitability, also manage the compliance requirements and needs that are entrusted on them as a legal practitioner, we talk about, or the Law Society rather, has divided some of the key obligations across these overall 3 important functions of business, compliance, and being able to run your practice and be passionate about it. The obligations, as the Law Society talks about in the bookkeeping compliance, as well as the compliance documents that are available. And what we've done is we've taken those requirements and we've broken it down into these 7 major categories. Okay, starting with the client intake, service, and communication. And in fact, a few weeks earlier, we had done a very specific webinar, very specific to this single topic. In fact, many of our webinar series focuses on these individual items and has a pretty long webinar, like 45 minutes to an hour, specifically talking about these individual topics. So we welcome you to go to our YouTube channel at all times and be able to view these videos. And in fact, some of these sessions are CPD accredited, so you should be able to utilize them across CPDs as well if you need them. So when we look at the 7 professional obligations that we've broken it down into, we start off with client intake, service, and communication. File management, which becomes pretty much the natural next step once you've done that initial intake. You've done the screening, the conflict checks, and you've determined to move forward, being able to create a matter or a file. Some of the important aspects of file management, we're going to definitely cover those in today's webinar. And then once you actually have created that file, like anything else within that matter, it's important that you have all the important processes and steps to manage the financial obligations of your client as well as your obligations as a practitioner as clearly outlined within the retainer letter or engagement letter. So we then talk about all the obligations within the financial management. Especially if you're going to be dealing with trust funds, that's a very important aspect of a legal practitioner's life, that you are able to utilize the trust funds to manage all the finances within a matter. If you're taking a retainer in, and of course there are a lot of requirements that go behind how best you manage those funds, how best you disperse those funds, and the importance of being able to ledger and journal these into specific templatized documents needed by the Law Society. Okay. The 4th aspect that we want to talk about within those obligations is business management. One of the fundamentals and the key aspects of you being a practitioner, especially if you're a solo practitioner, let's say you're not working for a firm and let's say you're running your own business, it becomes that much more important. And in fact, we have another webinar that talks about solo power, the importance of tools, techniques, and how best you can maximize your time. Even if this was a large legal firm, you still need to be able to manage your business. It's just that for many of these silos of obligations and requirements, larger law firms are able to afford individualized focus and individualized tasks that people can carry out to ensure that these obligations are met. Whereas if you're an individual solo practitioner, or let's say you're just a growing legal law firm, then of course you have multiple hats to wear. And these are some of the 7 important things that you should probably keep in mind as you juggle your day doing your business. So from a business management standpoint, we talk about the importance of managing your expenses, the importance of having the right tools to really give you just-in-time or immediate results when it comes down to understanding the revenue of your business, which of course translates into the P&L or profit and loss. Being able to assess, first and foremost, being able to access this information, but then later assess this information so that you can make meaningful business decisions that allow you to increase profitability, reduce the amount of time spent, and of course, review all the data that's coming into your firm so that you and your partners can make, as I said, key strategic business decisions to help improve the overall health of your business. Okay. We then talk about professional management. So a very key example of that is you being present today in this webinar. One of the important aspects of you being a professional, a legal practitioner or a professional is being able to comply with a lot of these requirements. One such simple requirement is that you have a certain amount of CPD credits. So today's webinar is 1 hour of professionalism. You, of course, have to comply with having so many hours of professionalism credits and then substantial credits. And the need for you to learn your skills, update your skills, and then employ those skills in your day-to-day life. So whether you're part of an association, whether you're part of a learning group, where you're able to sharpen and update your skills, things that you can do to keep the obligations and the importance of you being a legal professional. Okay? And believe it or not, the Law Society certainly talks about these last 2 items as well. So it's not just compliance when it comes to financial. Of course, there's a lot of importance that's given to how best you manage your financial ledgers and journals. And a lot of audits happen around with a lot of focus, let's say, on the financial numbers, because they want to make sure that money is not being misappropriated, knowingly or unknowingly. And of course, these are great checkpoints for them to share with you best practices, things you've been doing right, things that you can do better, right? But the Law Society understands how much of time, effort, and sweat that you got to put into this business to be able to manage all of these things at the same time. So they certainly talk about the need for you to have the right help, whether that's people, whether that's the right tools, or a combination of these two, to help you manage your time. Time management is critical because now you have to manage your own individualized time, so calendarizing your time between both dockets and the work that you put in and the other aspects of your business that you have to do to keep improving your business, the professional credits that you have to take on a Friday afternoon. And talking about time management, of course, post-COVID, things have changed a little bit, but as we slowly go back to the new norm, and hopefully once the courts have opened and it's more regular that we're visiting these courts, then it's important that you have a good schedule of being able to represent your client at court, being able to schedule these meetings where you're able to ensure that you're not double booked. So a big component of managing time comes with knowing where you have to be and the tasks that you have to do across the day, across the week, throughout the month. And the fact that this is a legal business and the fact that you're going to be meeting a lot of clients, prospective clients, existing clients, there are so many different things to do that just adds to a little bit of the complexity that's involved in managing that same time, the same day, the same week, and the month that everyone has, right? And last but not the least, the Law Society does talk about the need for personal management. And this is you giving yourself the time to take a step back and really assess your current success, failures, your current pros and cons of running your business. If you're able to provide quality time towards your own individual family life, friends and family, if you're being overly stressed because of the needs and the consistent, continual demands of this profession, and ensuring that you're not burning out and then eventually deciding to do something else. Because we often see that as well. If you're not set up for success, right, and if you don't have the right tools, the right guidance, the right help, and over a period of time, if you're not delivering success or the goods that you set up for as part of your expectation for that business, then what happens is eventually, slowly, we've started seeing either solo practitioners have other jobs that they could do. Sometimes they just join a firm. And even if this is a legal firm that's growing, this is an important aspect that we want to highlight. When you're starting to grow and you're starting to see a revenue, it's important that you always have kind of a oversight over everything that's happening within the business, not taking it for granted, being nimble, but at the same time growing at a speed that you're able to accommodate the speed. And hence, personal management comes with knowing what your individual expectations or individual group expectations can be for your business and being able to accomplish that with a lot of peace of mind, if you will, and without overburn. Okay? So those are kind of the 7 individualized topics, and we're going to just go through each of these topics real quick, high-level bulletins, and then if you want a deeper dive session, you can certainly YouTube and search for our YouTube videos that talk about these individual topics as well. Okay. So we'll first start with the client intake service and communication. The highlights of this particular first step or professional obligation is that for you as a legal practitioner to be able to have the right process, the tools, the software products, I would say the individuals that need to help you through accomplishing these obligations. So it could be a good combination of the process and techniques and tools that you use. But the bottom line is for you to be able to have a simple way to capture and record the calls and consultations that you have with your prospective clients, existing clients, and really that first step that a customer takes with your legal firm. Now, given that we're in 2021 and post-COVID, of course, a lot of simple techniques have been used by legal firms to help that first screening or that first consultation, first request to be made online, so that that's low-touch correspondence with the customer, having some simple screening questions to better understand the nature of that request, and then be able to have a customer go to your website to be able to enter that information and have that information. It's almost like a simple client intake form where they can fill it out and that being sent to you so that you can qualify that request and be able to act on it, maybe do a quick conflict check and then respond back. So how you accomplish these individualized tasks are continuing to improve, but what's important to keep in mind are the tasks themselves that are needed to be accomplished to keep that compliance in mind. So being able to have detailed recording of calls and consultations, immediately after you've done that initial client intake, maybe you've saved the name, the initial information about that prospective client. Very important for you to do a conflict check. we're starting to see that we're teaching these aspects within institutions across Canada, and we start to understand that there's a need for us to explain the conflict check process, right? Especially if it's a new firm, the questions are, okay, what if I've just gotten started? Of course, that's a good question, and the quick answer is, nevertheless, you still do the conflict check and document that there are no conflicts, because conflict checks need to be dated. So prior to you determining whether that's a conflict or not, and there's a conflict screening form provided by the Law Society that you actually are required to fill out to meet that complete compliance, that outlines why you determined as a legal firm or as an individual that this prospective client was not a conflict. Or if this was a conflict, what are the steps that you're taking next? Are you referring them to another legal practitioner? Have you declined the retainer? Or have you just moved forward with accepting the retainer and moving with the file? So step 2 of conflict checking, conflict screening, and reporting the conflict check, very important. Let's say we've agreed upon this, that there are no conflicts and you want to move forward. Then you create that file. And that initial client intake, service, and communication highlights the responsibility of the law firm or the legal firm to clearly articulate the nature and scope of the matter, the responsibilities of both the client and you as the legal firm towards that matter, and the financial and the time expectations that are mutual between you and the client. So, for example, if you are expecting a retainer at the beginning of that file, because that's the way you do business, then it's important to document it as part of that retainer letter, which highlights the nature and scope of the matter, the expectations from the client, and the obligations that you have to offer as a legal firm, your per hour rate, or if you're going to be dealing this as a flat rate matter, kind of what is the overall cost. If there are going to be disbursements part of that matter, then talking about your disbursement costs, how much do you charge for, I don't know, postage, fax, etc., mileage. So as part of that service and communication, the Law Society wants you to be very clear and thorough in explaining the obligations that you have towards the matter and the obligations that the client is agreeing upon in signing that file or matter with your legal firm. For example, we have a lot of legal firms that say once the retainer has dropped to about $500, let's say, then there's a need for the client to really top it up to $1,000 or $2,000. And hence, that would be a receipt or a retainer payment request that would be sent out from the legal firm, and it should not catch the client off guard, because they should be able to reflect back on the retainer letter, which hopefully they've read in thorough, to know that that's the expectation that was set out right from the beginning. So this is just one example of that, right? Similar example would be if there are no retainers in place, then if it's just a client engagement, then there's a certain expectation of when you expect the customers to pay you for your service. It could be as soon as you send the invoice. It could be within 7 days, 15 days. It could be one invoice a month. It could be several invoices in a month, as and when things happen. So all of these have to be clearly articulated in that initial letter or document that you sign with the client. And now moving on slightly into the aspect of communicating it once you've got the retainer from the customer. Of course, from a financial standpoint, the Law Society needs you to deposit into your trust account. If you've got it in cash, then there are certain rules and policies that you have to deposit it within 24 hours, right? And there's a certain amount, like anything above $7,500, for example, in the province of Ontario. I know anything about $7,500 cannot be accepted as cash towards a retainer. So providing a retainer receipt, clearly giving back and communicating back to the customer, thanking them for their initial retainer, giving them a receipt, sending invoices in time, whether that's via email or mail, at establishing the protocol of how you plan to correspond. Are you planning to use WhatsApp Business for corresponding? Are you going to be sending texts? Are you going to be sending emails as part of your legal firm's correspondence and communication protocol? Sometimes explaining the risks, rewards of these protocols are meaningful and helpful to the customer as well. Okay? So going through that entire workflow, keeping the customer in mind through the intake, then to the service and the communication and the correspondence with that client is pretty much what the Law Society talks about within this initial obligation. And then the last but not the least, if for whatever reason this particular transaction needs to have a closure or a logical closure with a non-engagement, or takes the route where it's a ghost client who has provided some information to you as part of some initial client intake, just flirting with the idea of retaining your firm, provide some information, and then, of course, like the word ghost disappears and never shows up, and you're unable to reach them out, then you have the obligation as part of that service and communication to email, mail, depending on what information you have, back to this customer that you and your legal firm, through this non-engagement letter, do not have any more responsibility towards that discussion of that matter or whatever maybe the conversation that you've had with that customer. Okay? So sometimes sending, in fact not sometimes, every time it's important that you do send out a non-engagement letter. And of course, the Law Society provides you with templates for that as well. And certain tools are able to use them as part of their practice management toolkit. Okay? And this is just a quick highlight, as I already mentioned, about a retainer agreement and pretty much what should be part of that retainer agreement at a minimum. We're starting with the nature and scope of matter till the risks associated with the methods of correspondence that you choose to have with your customer. Then we move on to the second obligation. You've done all the right things. You've got the retainer. And it's important for you in a parallel way to start that file or matter. Once you've done the conflict check, pretty much the next logical step is to be able to create a file so that there's an encapsulation for all the transactions, both financial and task-based, to be reflected in this one bundle called the matter. And there are certain important aspects that the Law Society talks about when it comes to file management. Okay? So what are some of these? One, they talk about a best practice for you as a legal firm to have a checklist. A simple checklist maybe within the business so that you or someone in your front staff members can go through this checklist when they create that matter to make sure that they have all the information needed to create this file. So for example, the client intake form, the conflict check report, and if you have a retainer requirement to even start the file, then that's checked off, and then you create the file. Now once you've created that file, it's important now that you have a uniqueness to that file. If they're the same file numbering system for multiple matters, then that's going to be confusing. So they talk about the need for some uniqueness in the file. But as a legal firm, you also have this need to do conflict checks, as we discussed. And hence, it's important that there's a bit of cross-indexing between files. So for example, if you have an individual as a party in a different matter, and if that same individual is coming back for representation to you, it's critical that you have the right techniques and tools to search up that name so that it gives you a perspective of them being a party, maybe a witness, or maybe some other type of a party in a different matter, so that you have a complete picture of all the possible conflicts that there may be in representing that individual. So files, in many ways, not only should be uniquely categorized, but should be available cross-indexed across all files because they're all kind of intertwined in many ways when it comes to managing individuals who you're representing. Okay. And of course, many years back when there was a survey done, I'm not sure how relevant it is today because everyone is moving towards electronic means of storing data. But if you are still storing data in manila folders and paper-based systems, then one of the surveys that talk about how a lot of time gets spent in a legal firm to just search up file information, just to be able to search up the individual's information when it comes down to a matter, all the obligations, outstanding money, things of that nature. So the Law Society does highlight that you find the right tools and techniques so that you can search for matter and files at your fingertips, literally. And today's tools and products do give you those options to be able to search them right on your fingertips, right from your phone even. Okay, so you've done the client intake, you've done all the right tasks, communicated to the customer, you've created a file, you've got the retainer in, right? Now you're going to be doing the day-to-day tasks needed as part of that business or that file to take it to a successful logical closure. And as you conduct your business towards that file and as you start to log in all these transactions, so when I talk about transactions, I'm talking dockets. So these could be dockets that are part of an initial client meeting. This could be a docket for tasks done, like document drafting, maybe for tasks that were done outside the office, like court visits. Could be disbursements that are expenses that you incur as a business on behalf of that client matter, such as court fee or application fee. Could be the mileage. All of these dockets and disbursements are specific to that matter, or rather, you should ensure that these dockets and disbursements are clearly categorized and entered into a system, paper or automated, with that uniqueness of that file, so it's easy for you to search that information and easier for you to do business too. And as you docket and disperse these individual items within that matter, there is a financial aspect of these dockets and disbursements that also have to be captured, managed, and maintained. And depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, there could be different compliance nature built across these transactions. Okay? So for example, if you're doing a electronic trust transfer from a trust account into your operating general account in the province of Ontario, then there is a Form 9A that's attached with regards to compliance. So it's important for you to keep in mind that some of these tasks have certain compliance requirements built right into it. Right? And from a financial management standpoint, of course, ensuring that if you're going to be, starts from day one of you starting your business, knowing if you're going to have a trust account in mind, knowing if you're going to, how many operating accounts you're going to have, if you're going to have a separate account for real estate, if that's an area of practice that you want to think about. Credit cards. If you're going to be having multiple credit cards, one specifically for your office expenses, maybe another credit card specifically maintained to do all of your disbursements, so that's easy for you to reconcile at the end of the week, the month, and make sense with where the money has gone. But you decide all of that up front, especially the trust and the operating account. And of course, if there's a retainer involved, you deposit that money into the trust account and not the operating account. If it's in the trust account, then of course, I'm sure you're aware of many of the policies regarding the trust, that it's left untouched. Any transaction in and out is customer related. So if there are other fees or bank fees and service fees that you have to pay for, that they're not taken out of the trust account, but rather taken out of your operating account, and that's something that you tell your financial institution that you're dealing with, so that they're aware of that. the policies around, as I mentioned, when should you move money and how much. And that comes down to being able to record these dockets disbursements, convert them into a document called the invoice that you now send out to your client, reflecting the exact amount that you're asking them for, which is a combination of the work put in terms of dockets, the disbursements in terms of the expenses expended, including sometimes the jurisdictional taxes that you may have received or plan to receive. In some files, maybe you don't have a HST or a provincial tax number yet and you're not charging taxes, then that's needed to be clearly indicated in the invoice. If you've paid taxes towards expenses, because there are some types of expenses or disbursements rather that could have a provincial tax component. There could be other types where there is no tax implication. For example, the court or the application fee typically doesn't have a tax involved, whereas a mileage or maybe some other type of disbursement could actually have tax implications. So you capture all of these, reflect it in an invoice, clearly articulated, send it to the customer. If it's a retainer arrangement, then exactly to the amount that you've generated in that invoice, that's the eligible amount that you can now transfer from trust to general, because that's your earned money and it's called the eligible trust funds. Not a penny more, not a penny less, because that helps with reconciliation. Right? So let's say you've charged $1,130, you've got an initial retainer of $1,500, then when you send that invoice out, you can now simply move $1,130 from your trust account into your operating account. Not $1,135 or $1,000, depending upon the transactions. You can pick and choose within that $1,130 which ones you want to transfer. Sometimes people just do the dockets or just the disbursements, right? But they all have to match to the number indicated in the invoice. Now, once you've done that, as I mentioned, it's important that you're generating these invoices on time. That's one checkpoint. Doing the trust transfers on time, or reaching out to the customer for payments on time, and generating all the compliance documents that go along with these transactions, generating them on time. Right? And the last obligation is being able to find a way to reflect all these transactions in these compliant-specific templatized documents called ledgers, journals, reconciliation documents that the Law Society expects you to do. So each transaction, when you're moving it from one financial institution's account to another, one trust account to generating account or operating account, vice versa, money coming in and money going out of a bank account needs to be captured, right? Whether that's a ledger, journal, disbursements journal, or as I mentioned, your reconciliation. Now, in addition to managing your files and the financial elements of those files, which are important because that's generating the revenue for you, and keep in mind, disbursements are recoverable expenses, so they do become part of that initial revenue because it's reflected in the invoice. But again, it kind of negates itself when you've actually paid for it as part of your office management expenses. The next important obligation that you have for yourself is to be able to manage your business. Well, as I mentioned before, having all of the plans ready, the strategies ready, both strategic, tactical, operating strategies around how you manage your business. How do you ensure you keep the lights on for your business for a longer period of time? So starting with initial capital, how much are you going to infuse into the business? How much are you planning to draw out of the business over a period of time? What are the different, or being aware and being prepared for all the different expenses that go behind starting a legal business, starting from your law society fees to the errors and omission fees, because these are a given component of it. Purchasing the right hardware, whether it's a laptop, iPad, tab, whatever they may be, to support you through this, buying or purchasing all of those important software components, a practice management, legal accounting, sometimes tools such as uLaw combine these two, and there are other tools that are available that you should explore. Could be the Office 365, could be the Gmail for your email, the websites that you have to build for marketing, the marketing dollars that you have to spend for brand awareness. So either talking to a colleague or talking to others who have done this business, or if you're just graduating out of an institution, of course, there's going to be a lot of information that these institutions provide you with. Right? So business management is having a proper critical business plan of how best you can execute on the expense management and the expectation of revenue and being able to continue to stay afloat and profitable. And we highlight this more of an obligation because that's an obligation for yourself, and it's also an obligation that you're running your business right, being profitable so that you can be that legal practitioner for a long period of time. Because nobody really wants you to come in, not be successful, and then leave with a bitter taste, right? The Law Society wants you to be having your vested interest and have a growing profession within this Law Society's overall umbrella, right? And then, of course, we talk about professional management. And you can actually Google this in terms of, depending on the jurisdiction that you're from, there's a more detailed explanation of the professional obligations. But kind of the top four that we have seen across provinces in Canada is certainly talk about the need for you to complete your required CPD hours, or continued professional development hours. You have that, of course, for all of these various different professions, whether you're a legal practitioner, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a dentist, doctor. There's different CPD, CME accreditations that are needed. I believe it's about 3.5 or 3 hours of professionalism credits in a year, and there's substantial as well. Okay, so certainly keep a tab of all your professional and substantial CPD hour requirements in a year. For example, today's webinar is accredited for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits. And you can also YouTube search our channel for previous CPD credits that we have conducted. Review the entire video in its entirety and be able to then take that topic or the title. For example, today's title is Everything Practice Management. You could take that title, enter it into your individual Law Society's website, and be able to take those credits. The Law Society talks about, again, we spoke about sharpening your skills, updating your skill sets, so reviewing new legislations and case laws, things that have changed, being top of your game, from really being a true legal professional. That's something that the Law Society most definitely highlights, that you really need to stay updated with your legislations and case laws. Reviewing your professional conduct guidelines. And that's an important document. Of course, it's slightly away from the typical practice management legal accounting that we continue to talk about and be ambassadors of. But it's important that you, as a legal firm, conduct these guideline checklists, especially for professional conduct, not just for yourself as the owner of the business, but also across everyone that works for your business, right? And being able to have a thorough knowledge of the different conduct guidelines expectations being met as part of that requirement. And last but not the least, as I mentioned before, especially after COVID, we all are definitely longing to go back to the old normal to some extent, meeting people and being part of associations, and whatever association there may be, or a certain group with common interest, common pain points, allows you to have a co-sharing of experiences so that you can learn from that and you can, of course, teach that to others in that group or associations. There's quite a few associations that we find within the legal practice. Sometimes that certainly helps build a little bit of friendship, camaraderie within the group. Okay. For someone's just asked about today's webinar, so for friends who've just joined us today, today's topic for the CPD webinar is everything practice management, and we've covered, I would say, up to the professional management out of the top 7 professional obligations that we believe that you as a legal practitioner have to keep in mind, starting with the client intake, service, and communication, to file management, financial management related to the file itself, business management, being able to manage office expenses and planning for it, and then of course we just completed with the professional obligation around professional management. Okay? I think there's just a couple more with regards to time management, and there's personal management. And these are more generic topics, and I've mentioned this many times before. There are quite a few books. There's maybe a plethora of videos out there that talk about time management, the essence of time management. There's some gurus who pretty much talk about this day in and day out. So we're not trying to generalize the need for someone to have a time management concept, because we all do as individuals. Besides those important core principles of time management, so for example, simple things like procrastination, so do your best to not procrastinate, right? That's very generic. I'm sure we can all learn from that experience. We all do it every day. I'm sure we can all be better every day. Having a schedule, that's very common for everyone, so that we are completely aware of where the time is going. But in a legal office, sometimes what happens is if you're not measuring time and qualifying the time spent, then it's harder to quantify when it comes down to you doing your numbers at the end of the day. Okay? I know that sounded too cliche. So bottom line is, in a legal office, one of the important aspects we find, really the day in and day out task, is to be able to manage a simple list or a to-do list of work that needs to get done, work that was planned, work that needs to get done in a particular period, and if this is a growing firm, across individuals. So you have an office manager in larger firms. In smaller firms, it could be just the individual who manages her or his time or their time. And this becomes very critical, converting those work in progress into completed timesheets so that it's easy for you to convert time into money. Because everyone talks about that. Time is money, and it's very true in the legal office. Wouldn't you agree? So unless you're able to qualify where the time has gone in that legal office, it's hard for you to quantify the revenue that's coming out of that time spent. Because in a legal office, you're not going to be spending 8 hours or all the 8 hours on files. And not every task that you do within a matter is billable, right? But you still need to find a way to be able to dock it, or find a way to enter the task accomplished with or without a quantified revenue number against it. For a simple example, we talk about this in a lot of our webinars around measuring or having a strategy to measure pro bono hours. So the word pro bono is so synonymous with the legal firms these days. You don't find pro bono as a term really in a dentist's office. You don't find pro bono as a term in some other businesses. You certainly think about legal business when you talk about pro bono. And we found out from some earlier surveys that were conducted by the Law Society, reading through those, and even understanding our customers' needs, that being able to track pro bono hours, one, gives you a better purpose of where time's been spent. Two, gives you a better sense for how much of time has been provided to each of these customers and the nature of those customers. So if there's a certain area of practice, you are now able to generate a trend that you as a business owner can then rely upon when you actually go get that next specific area of practice. So for example, if you find that in a lot of the family matters or in a lot of the criminal matters or maybe LATB, small claims, and I know I'm spreading right across many different practices, but it's very natural for you to understand where pro bono hours are being spent the most. Or maybe type of customer. You can even go granular, as simple as most of referral customers I tend to put a lot more pro bono hours in. Right? You're trying to really impress upon them because they came as a customer referral, maybe a client referral, a family referral. We find sometimes legal firms go and put out that extra time and money in ensuring success, for example. So understanding that and acknowledging that as a trend, and then what decision you make after that is dependent on your judgment of that data. But if you don't have that data, you're not going to be able to make these wonderful decisions. So from a time management standpoint, outside of all the cliched time management guru talk that we all need to have anyways, the two important components that I would like to highlight, or we would like to highlight when it comes to time management in a legal office, is one is to have a certain task list that is associated with, as I mentioned, file, non-file, individual, and an overarching summary of the entire firm, typically across work in progress and timesheets. And the second most important is measuring the pro bono hours, hours that you're spending in a matter, but you're not billing them for. One is non-billable, where you're spending time on business-related, non-file-related. Then there comes the time where it's file-related, but you cannot generate revenue out of it. And there could be many reasons for that, right? So it's critical that you manage these two aspects of it. And the third, maybe just to stretch it out a little bit from a legal practice perspective, it's important to keep your eyes only on top of the active files that you're working on. Like a legal business may have thousands of files that you've dealt with, but maybe in any given point in time, you have 10 active files that needs your complete attention. So if you can classify those files, as active and other statuses, and keep your focus on those active current files, or you call them current, that gives you a better purpose of where the time is going to go. And you use the other statuses like archived, etc., more from a conflict check perspective and knowing the past for both file and customer-related information. Okay? So that's what we'll probably leave you with time management. And please use the chat window at all times if you have any questions. I do apologize that you received the email a bit late today. Typically, it's a Friday afternoon from 2 to 3. But nevertheless, we are recording this session and will be available on our YouTube channel as early as Monday. So you'll be able to replay the whole video and still be able to get your CPD credits. So hopefully that helps. The last aspect, the name of the CPD session is Everything Practice Management. Okay? So we've covered 6 out of the 7, and the last one is around personal management. Okay. I think we touched on this briefly. This is where the Law Society wants you to be successful. Now, the definition of success is very personal to each and every individual. It could be the success of you being able to win the cases for certain types of people. The success could be financial success, a trend of profitability that you're seeing. And that's, who are we kidding? It's important to stay profitable. It's important to plan for success to be profitable because you need the money to run the business. But there also could be aspects, other non-financial success goals that you may, as an individual or as a firm, strive to work for. And what the Law Society talks about, and something that we would like to highlight, is continue to review these success goals. Have an initial list, a very short list of what success means to you or will mean to you for the first 6 to 8 months. So brand awareness could be success, right? Being able to generate referral leads could be a success. Being able to grow your team size could be a success. These are all milestone-based successes, but define them. Define them early in your business and continue to refine them as you progress through that business. Because unless you have that definition and the refinement of these goals, sometimes even when you accomplish them, you're not recognizing them. And when you don't recognize them, you continue to strive for something that you haven't really thought about. Right? So let's take a brief moment of a victory lap when we've defined what our success criteria is and we've hit that goal. Of course, setting the next stage in what that goal looks like as you refine that goal, that's a very natural progression that we all do. But unless you make those definitions right, you're not going to benefit from recognizing that you've actually met those goals, right? So the Law Society certainly talks about defining your goals and defining them as you go along. I know it sounds cliche, but it's very important, we believe, in a legal practice. We've been in this business now for about 12 years, and we find in the legal business it's important to have quick, small wins almost every day, every week, every month to keep that motivation going, right? Because there's a lot of, I would say, it takes a lot of your brain power running a legal business. There's a lot of things that are happening at the same time, a lot of balls being juggled, a lot of responsibilities, constant tension that drains your brain. That's my quote for the day. And unless you have these moments of empowerment where you're like, yes, I've done this, I've planned out for this, and I've done this. When you have that, it kind of reassures you, gives you that little bit of happiness, a sense of accomplishment that pushes you to work the next day, right? So satisfaction within the legal practice and enjoying is very important. Now, having the right tools can also help you drive data that can even change the way you originally thought about doing your business. We've had many businesses that we've helped and we've worked with where originally they thought their strength was in family matters, divorce, separation, etc. But when we're able to show them through data that their success, both financial and time success, came in other areas of practices. So for one legal business, it came through real estate. And it seemed like, real estate, there isn't much to it, right? It's cookie cutter, everyone's doing it. But that's where the success came, that's where the branding came, that's where the clients came. And they were able to make good revenue, profitable revenue, with limited time being spent on it, right? And that really helped the business. And there was the multiple family matters that dragged on forever, did not give them the profitability that they expected or defined as a goal. And now they've redefined their brand as a firm after the first couple of years. It's changed the brand from being a family law legal office. Again, I'm not saying they're specifically saying we're a real estate legal office, but it's changed their branding. It's changed the way they look at things. So it's helped them change gears, be more satisfied with that approach, and still stay in business and be happy about it, and hence you're continuing to stay in the business and be content as a legal practitioner. Satisfaction with growth, progress, and financial success. As I mentioned before, who are we kidding? We all need financial success. That's a must. But having a clear-cut goal and having those small wins, simple victory laps every week, every month, critical. It's very critical and might seem an over-exaggeration, but I guess post-COVID, everything is, and no one's judging anymore. Recording your time spent at work and vacation taken. And believe it or not, the Law Society certainly talks about that. Sometimes we talk about this COVID being like a long vacation, a very stressful vacation, a lot of working from home, or staying at home at least. But as we now go into this new norm, of course, we all want our stress busters. And even before COVID, this is a webinar we've been running for several years now. We often talk about the need for legal practitioners to take a week, a month, whatever is specific to their need, to take those days off, as I mentioned before, because it's a very stressful job. And when I talk about stress, it's a lot of brain time. It's not physical labor. You're not going there and breaking roads and stuff like that. You're constantly thinking about something, and there are many things to think about, right? And that really drains you and tires you, and you need that little space, mind space, as they call it, for you to relax. And that's what the Law Society talks about, too. As part of all these obligations come this simple obligation to yourself to keeping you happy and sane so that you're motivated to continue to being in this stressful line of business and being successful at it. And last but not the least, again, part of that burn, where many practitioners do leave the business both because of the, overburn on their time, not being able to spend time with family and friends, really not feeling comfortable with this whole, why am I doing this type of question? And at the end of the day, if they've not planned for success and financial management was not great to begin with, then there is sometimes the financial goals don't meet. Pretty much makes it, a quick decision for them to make, saying, all right, let's close business and do something else. And that's not what the Law Society wants you to do. We want you to plan for success, enjoy those little successes, refine those goals, and work towards meeting them with a proper work-life balance, if you can. Okay? And this comes to kind of our last slide, which is really the benefit of a practice management system. Now, in all of this, you would notice that there's an underlying need for time. There's an underlying need for efficiency. And that is a multiplication factor for costs that directly hits the bottom line of your financial management. And hence, if you're doing things in an old school manual way, if you're doing 2 files a year, 5 files a year, 10 files a year, I guess it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to be involving your firm in multiple matters a day, multiple matters a month, and they all add up, you have the need for the right tools to help automate, if not all 100% of the work to be done, a good percentage of, I would say, the usual or expected tasks that you have to do. You don't have to do random tasks for each file, right? It's like they say, the usual suspects. There are certain documented tasks that you have to do, same grind, beyond a point. So if you know for an area of practice, family matter, these are all the dockets. You can fill them once you create a family matter. If you know the LATB, these are all the tasks to be done. Simple. If your retainer letter is templatized, you don't have to generate them every time. If your quote forms are automated, you don't have to fill them out manually every time. Or even if you do make the mistake, you don't have to go and rewrite this. There are tools that allow you to automate a good chunk of the workflow steps that are done day in and day out for those types of areas of practices. So why not explore the purchase of a software that can allow you to automate these tasks, reduce the time that you spend, increase efficiencies, and give you all the benefits at a certain nominal cost. Today in 2021, with the web, online, everything going online, a lot of these tools cost you less than a cup of coffee a day, right? So utilizing the right tools, techniques, process, and sometimes the individuals needed are going to help you accomplish these 7 obligations or professional obligations that are expected out of you as a legal practitioner, from client intake, file management, financial, business management, professional, time, and personal management. Okay? So with that, we're definitely at the top of the hour, and I'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. Right? And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to open the floors. Please do use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. And I do thank everyone who joined me, and we do apologize from uLaw. Typically, we do have our email reminders being sent out a couple of times in the day prior to the webinar. We should certainly check that out as to what happened there, but I'm sure we'll take care of that going forward. But as I said, this is being recorded, will be available on our YouTube channel as early as Monday.